Welcome everyone to Global Purpose Speaks. I'm your host, DJ Taz Rashid. I'm a musician who travels to mindful festivals and events all over the world. And one of my passions is to have conversations with transformational leaders, learn about their unique missions and how they're changing the world. This talk series is created in partnership with Global Purpose Movement. And this is a collective of change makers convening and co-creating in our Earth's current shift towards a world that's working for everyone. Today we're chatting with Jon Darrall-Rew, who's co-founder of Synergy Forum and teaches Tibetan Buddhism and an integral approach to global spirituality in Berlin, and works as a transformational guide with individuals. Welcome, Jon. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you for having me.
So Jon's come all the way from Berlin this week to be here with the Green Heart International team and Green Heart Transforms. So we're grateful that you can be with us today and be part of this talk show here. And Jon, I was reading your bio. It sounds like you've had quite an experience in your personal spiritual path. Just before I go into it and start mixing up all the dates, why don't you just tell us, like, how did you get into all that, and what led you to that path?
Yeah, sure. So I think I kind of came into life with my feet on the path in a certain way. So when I was super young, pretty much from as early as I can remember, I had a really clear sense of connection to Source, to an all-pervading reality that is intrinsically sacred. That was always super clear for me. I used to have kind of debates and arguments with my mom when I was like 6, who neither of my parents are particularly spiritual, religious. And
what would your parents have? Any kind of religion?
My father is a Catholic in name only.
Okay.
He wants his last rites when he passes, but he's never been a practicing Catholic, really. So I didn't grow up in an environment that was kind of spiritually open or interested. But yeah, to me it was just super obvious. I had a sense that there is an intrinsically and unconditionally sacred dimension to life that is always here.
What was that feeling? Like when you're 6, you may not be thinking about what. Did you have a feeling? What was the feeling in your body when you felt that?
Held. And I think I came into life and I had certain things that were kind of in my awareness already, really. Little instructions that were present for me. So one was realize the nature of God, come to understand the nature of God, experientially. The second was go to the different communities of this world and come to understand what they know of the sacred, what they know of the divine. And the third was like this little kind of animation that played in my head. It was really like this simple kind of crazy little animation, and it basically showed the immortality of the soul. It showed that death is not a barrier, that what we are continues, and not to hold fear around that. So those things were with me from the earliest age that I can really remember.
Yes, cartoons, it's awesome. They've even, your imagination even made it to like fit your young soul. That's great.
And from there, life kind of took 2 routes really as I was growing up. And one route was a maturation of that, so it was a kind of continued, authentic exploration of spirituality and consciousness and being and life and kind of mystical exploration of what on earth is going on here, what on earth this is. And the other path was I had a rough time in various ways. I think I like a bunch of people who come in with some sense of consciousness to them, have a particular point, often in their childhood, where they have a realization of, oh my God, look at the world I've come into. And that happened for me. And I had some rough times as I was growing up, as I increasingly became aware of the struggles and the pain and the suffering of this world, and grew up in a family environment that was hard, that had some real challenges to it.
How did you cope with that? Like, can you give us like maybe one example?
I contracted, and I became a very depressed young man, actually. And I always had a very authentic sense of spirituality. I always felt the authenticity of my connection to the sacred, and as it existed within myself and also in the world as a whole. But I was also kind of angry with it, And
did you have like cynical kind of feeling, or like just
I was a really unhappy young man. And my family situation was hard. There was some violence there and so on. And my dad is an alcoholic. Now he's been kind of, he hasn't drunk anything for 2 years, which is wonderful.
That's great.
Stepfather was a violent alcoholic for a period, you know. And there was a real confrontation with the challenges of this world, and I definitely contracted. And that period actually led to a schism with my family at the end of my teen years. I was actually homeless between the ages of 18 and 22.
Wow. 4 years?
4 years. 4 years of homelessness, yeah. And it was a profound time.
Can you tell us a little bit? That's a long. Tell us a little. You have to tell us a little bit about that.
So I wasn't just on the streets during that time. I spent time staying in squats. Squats. So it's an English word for an abandoned building where homeless people may live or may not. You know. Squats can range all the way from ones which are just abandoned places that homeless people live, all the way through to there's communities of homeless people who treat them really well and like do them up and make them beautiful. I didn't live in those.
The luxury squats.
Yeah, I didn't live in the luxury squats. Through to staying on friends' sofas at times, and all the way through to a good portion of it was spent living in like night shelters or hostels for homeless men. Yeah, and it was real, man. Yeah, it was intense. It was the way I look back on that time. I had several experiences were really the things which I feared most in the world happened. The things where I felt myself more alone and isolated and without anywhere to go or anyone to help me than I had previously imagined possible. And in those times I always had a kind of strange experience, which is I still felt held by something. And to be honest, actually, in those experiences, I didn't quite have the depth and grounding within myself to really understand that. I knew that I'd have these strange experiences where a new level of, oh my God, what am I going to do? It kind of emerged, and I'd feel within myself, and I feel, okay, that kind of feels a little strange because I still feel okay.
So you felt okay, you felt held, you were homeless at this time, you were kind of bouncing around, so it still sounds like you had that sense of survival going on.
The feeling of absolutely all about survival. And I experienced a depth of community with people during that time, a depth of connection with other human beings, other homeless people, that I received levels of care and brotherhood and fellowship from the people that I was connected during that time. I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for them. And I really, I'm forever grateful to those amazing brothers and sisters who helped me during that time.
Were you doing any kind of particular spiritual studies, or that was a spiritual study, life?
Yeah, that was where life came in to kind of give me a particular
wisdom, pure wisdom.
Yeah.
What happened at the age of 22 that got you out of this, situation?
Yeah, sure. Well, during that time, sometimes angels and masters live in the most unexpected places.
Sure.
And believe me, the world of homelessness is a place where there are angels and masters who live. And sometimes we find them. And I came into contact with some people who were also in that world, who introduced me to some spiritual literature that I immediately sensed an extremely deep connection to. The works of Alice Bailey and the particular Tibetan sage Jon Darrall-Rew, and I had an immediate, for me I would say I had an obvious soul recognition of this material, an obvious recognition of my connection to it. And it was also the case that I started to live, I got out of the hostel that I was staying in, I started to live in one of their owned houses and rented out houses in the city that I was living in. And I think that in my own experience, the work that I do with people are like plants, right? So plants just require the right conditions. They require basic right conditions. And when they have those, then the inherent intelligence of their life force moves them to grow in the way that's right for them. And the same is right for human beings. So that's really happened to me. I started to live somewhere where I had my own front door. I had a place where I could come and go and so on. And that my life force started to move. The innate intelligence of my being started to find guidance and so on. And there came a particular time, which is really just before that, where I was in the room in this hostel for homeless men that I was living in. I remember I was kind of sitting on the floor, cross-legged, and I was looking through the window, and I was looking at rays of light coming in through the window. And the way I describe it is it's kind of like the fish hook of my soul just came and got me, really. And I had a clear sense, okay, I stand at a crossroads at this particular point in my life, and I now have the opportunity to choose which way I go. And I can.
You felt that. You felt the crossroads.
Yeah, I think we all sometimes.
What were the two roads that you saw?
So I was doing drugs. I was engaging in some pretty self-destructive behaviors. I was connected to a community of people who, a bunch of people had died, a bunch of people had gone to prison.
Wow.
And or were on their way to one or the other. Mm-hmm. And the clarity that I had in that moment of time was that if I chose to continue in that mode of life for that period of time, then that might not be forever, but it would be the next phase. And I'd get a chance later on to make another choice maybe. But I lived by the choices that I made for that next phase, or I could choose something different. And it invited me into a deep contemplation of, why am I here? I've done the whole thing of, wow, I'm deeply heartbroken at the world that I found myself a part of, and that's taken me into a place of just losing myself within myself in deep depression and darkness, and I'd kind of seen that through to a point where there wasn't a lot further to go on that path, and I had to check in with myself and feel, okay, so am I up for saying yes to this life in a way that brings forth what I feel I may have come here to be and to do. And I felt very clear that actually, yeah, I really want to give myself to this life, and I'm going to contribute to the world becoming a better place for myself, for other people, and to allow the authentic note of the spirituality that had always been present for me to become something integrated and whole and able to give in a deep way to this world. So, yeah, that's...
So that's a beautiful mission. Like, did you see with that path and mission, like, a particular offering that you had to engage in, or like look deeper within, a way to make the world a better place in some unique manner?
No, not at that time. I felt like I just needed to give myself to my path.
Sure.
I needed to begin...
Even looking at what that path is.
Yeah. So that was where, I started meditating at the age of 15, but that was where I became a committed spiritual practitioner. I stopped doing all the things which I needed to stop doing. I found myself somewhere to live. I started working. I was working, putting on art groups for adults with learning disabilities and people with mental health problems. And I went with this deep path that had emerged in this connection to this spiritual literature I've been connected to, the Trans-Himalayan teachings, and that became my path for like the next 8 years or so. And I went to university. I studied psychology. I really wanted to. I found the work of Ken Wilber as well at this time, which really...
This is in Berlin?
No. So all of this was happening in the UK. So all of this was happening in the UK, and just outside of London. And I went to university, and studied psychology. I wanted to get into meditation research. At the end of my degree, I was invited to do a PhD at Oxford University, between Oxford University and Bangor University in North Wales, taking meditation research into prisons. It was a project which I developed. It was something I felt really connected to. And then I had another one of those really life-changing moments, really, where I went on...
Another fork in the road.
Another fork in the road, yeah, totally. And
now what are the options here?
Yeah, it was an awesome one. I had begun to be connected to a spiritual teacher called Bruce Lyon, who remains today one of my closest teachers, closest brothers, most beloved presences in my life, a really extraordinary being. And he had organized a retreat in the Egyptian desert. And this is where I first met Dustin, who you also interviewed.
Yeah.
Dustin and I very clearly and immediately had a really, really deep connection and soul resonance and understanding of the path that we were walking, the work that we felt motivated to give in the world. And at that time, I had a very strong movement of clarity come through me whilst we were in the desert. The desert is an ancient master. If you ever need a little bit of life clarity, I
teacher there.
Head out to the desert and see what happens.
Jim Morrison, that's why he was always going out there from the doors.
Deserts are profound places. They really are. Different spaces on the earth with different ecosystems have their own teachings, I think. And it became really clear for me that the PhD was something I was always going to do before I did what I really needed to do. And the clarity that came through for me was just do what you need to do now.
Yeah.
Just do that. And so I said, okay. I went back to the UK and I said to the institutions involved, thank you, but I'm not going to do this. And, and I ended up moving to the mountains of North Greece.
Really?
Yeah, I began a relationship with a wonderful Greek woman who I still have a very deep connection to. Yeah, it was another profound situation. She was the youngest of 3 kids, and their mother had died in childbirth for her. And so they had no mother, and their father was in the process of dying of leukemia.
Wow.
The kids had returned from their various places where they were studying and so around Europe to go back to their family home in the mountains of North Greece, where they wanted to continue their father's legacy. And that had been to attempt to establish the place for conscious community and as a place that could really contribute deeply to the community, the village that they lived in the mountains of North Greece. And that was something I felt very called to, and it gave me an opportunity also to make a big transition in my life and to put myself in a position. They gave me the opportunity. I'm forever grateful to kind of jump a chasm in a certain way and to find myself on the other side where the path that I was then walking, the work that I was then doing was emerging on the basis of my alignment with my purpose and nothing else. And that was really a point of deep transition for me. And from that time forward, I started working with a group project based in Switzerland, which was dedicated to what does social transformation look like that comes from a basis in deep spiritual principles of awakening and unity consciousness. And I did that work with Dustin and the rest of a really wonderful team I'm still wonderfully connected to.
How did you, you're one of the co-founders of Synergy Forum. How did you and Dustin kind of like collaborate to come to that idea? How did that come to be?
Well, Synergy Forum emerged, so we did this work in Switzerland for 3 years.
Yeah.
And
this is in Geneva, right?
Right, it was in Interlaken.
Oh, Interlaken. Oh, I've been there.
Yeah,
nice. Skydiving.
Yeah. So it's surrounded by some of the most incredible
it's beautiful.
mountains.
I love it.
Yeah. So at the end of that 3 years, we still felt, the whole of the group still felt, we want to continue doing this work. We're all servants of this work, servants of contributing to the emergence of increasingly unified forms of human culture and society that are rooted in principles of love, compassion, wisdom, presence. And Dustin and I felt that we still were really called to this work. And so Synergy Forum is what we put together as the essentializing, the harvesting, the synthesizing of the very best that we learned during that period on how to take people through a process that allows them to engage their contribution and participation in global change from the most whole, most awake, most empowered place, really. And so that's what we put together for Synergy Forum, and that's what it's emerged as.
So what are some of the things you're doing outside of Synergy Forum right now? I mean, I know you teach Tibetan Buddhism. How did you get into the teaching element of that? Like, how did that evolve?
Yeah, so
that's a nice big step.
through great acts of grace.
Yeah.
So when I went to university, I wanted to get into meditation research, and just at the same time that I joined the university, there was a woman researcher who joined the research department there who was doing meditation research. And she turned out to be the wife of 10 years of a Tibetan Lama, Tibetan Buddhist Lama, meditation master, who was a teacher of Dzogchen, this Tibetan tradition that I have had a love affair with for a large amount of my life, really. I'm just in love with this tradition and the lineage, and from a place within myself deeper than I could probably ever explain why. So I formed a relationship with her. She became my supervisor for the years that I was at university and the meditation research that I did. I formed a relationship with him, and so began a process of being a student of this really remarkable, amazing man who is a living demonstration of what it means to live from a place of true awakening, freedom, and deep care for every being and part of the earth that he comes into contact with moment to moment.
Yeah.
And so living by his example and receiving teachings from him, at a certain point, a couple of years ago, he invited me to start teaching.
Wow.
And so I've had the privilege to do that.
So you teach Dzogchen?
I don't teach Dzogchen just yet, so I teach the path into Dzogchen. So I teach the preparatory practices to Dzogchen. So Dzogchen is understood in the Tibetan tradition to really be the kind of culminating practice. In certain ways, it's the ground practice for opening up what they describe as an awakening to the true nature of our being, which is infinite awake presence, the true nature of reality, which is infinite awake presence, arising as love, as everything. You know, this is the deepest realization that the Eastern or generally the global non-dual mystical traditions point to. Dzogchen has its own particular profound brand of that, and within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, they have a path for preparing a person to enter into that practice, and I teach that, and look forward to the opportunity in days to come when I teach Dzogchen proper. And
is that done through invitation? Like you're invited to move on to teach that, or do you have like a certain certification, and how does that?
So my teacher, we've talked about this, and it's in the coming. You know, I'll spend a couple of years continuing to teach these practices, and to continue to set a foundation that he finds the community of teachers and practitioners that he's a part of finds trustable. Finds that it really sets the foundation to be able to then communicate and transmit the teachings in a way that's in accordance with the depth that they're held by the Tibetan community and have been held for the last millennia and a half.
Are you, so you're teaching, you're working with Synergy Forum. Is there any other projects you're currently working on?
Well, I do one-to-one work with individuals as well. So
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So something I'm super passionate about is I feel like as one of the good parts of globalization today, we have access to pretty much all the knowledge and wisdom that's been cultivated by different communities around the world over time over what contributes to awake, happy, flourishing human functioning. And often people have the perspective that all of these different pathways, they're different pathways and they lead to the same place. I think that's a really good entry perspective, but I think there's a deeper and better, deeper perspective, which is that sometimes they don't lead to the same place, and I think that's really good news. Sometimes they actually are relating to, they're addressing different aspects of our human potential. And the beauty of that is that today we have the opportunity to put the different pieces of the puzzle together in a way that perhaps has never happened before. And what that leads to is the opportunity to envision a depth of human integration, awakening, and full flourishing that perhaps we haven't seen before, and that can be the birthing of a whole new stage in human evolution, I believe, and at the same time for the collective, of a whole new level of how we relate to spirituality and the path as a whole. So we begin to synthesize from the Eastern awakening traditions, from the Western traditions that understand psychological development and collective evolution, from the shamanic traditions that understand what it means to really live in harmony with our communities and with the earth, from the Middle Eastern traditions, which help us understand how to live in deep, heartfelt relationship to the divine, and to be moved by the will of that through our lives. And so when we put all of these together, we get an integrated path, and so I teach that as well in Berlin with groups, and I also work with individuals.
Is there a name for that particular path you teach, the integrated path?
It's like integral. So there's the Integral Spiritual Practice Group, Berlin, and then my own personal work with individuals. I have a website called Naked Light, which is it's inspired. Nakedlight.org. Yeah, so you can check out the work that I'm involved in there, and
It sounds like a lot of amazing things. Are you working on any kind of books or anything like that, or?
Yeah.
Oh, you are.
So Dustin and I have a book which we're about to have published.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, thank you. It's a book called Earth is Eden.
Earth is Eden.
Earth is Eden, an integral exploration of the Trans-Himalayan teachings. So, as well as Dzogchen, as well as integral theory, integral spirituality, this Trans-Himalayan teachings, this body of teachings that I mentioned earlier. Alice Bailey's work, Joel Kuhl, Bruce Lyon, my teacher Bruce Lyon's work, Elena Blavatsky as well, and all kind of parts of this tradition that has been itself a contribution to the next stage of the evolution of the way human beings relate to spirituality. And over the last kind of 100, 150 years, it's a really profound body of teachings. And Yeah, so Dustin and I put together this book, Earth is Eden, which is a kind of integral, it's an integrally informed exploration of these teachings. So it's really an attempt to synthesize and to go deeper with Eastern spirituality, this integral framework that allows us to connect that to a Western understanding of psychological development and evolution, and also cosmology, the kind of cosmological models for the increasingly magical way we understand the universe we're a part of and how it's developed. So it's an attempt to synthesize these things and to explore what a truly cosmocentric spirituality would look like and how that can support the emergence of increasingly unified and awake forms of culture and society. So,
is there a release date for that? Or?
We'll be releasing it in the next month or so.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So it's been a real pleasure to write that, and
it's got to be exciting.
Yeah, it's been awesome. What I find, I used to be in a band, and it was a great, such an enjoyable thing, and I found it such a good mark of the quality of what we produced that I knew that whether I was in that band or not, I would want to listen to that music. And I feel that way with this book. I feel like whether I've been a part of writing this book or not, I would really want to read this book. So
that's great.
I don't know about anyone else, but for myself, it really super inspires me and enlightens me.
That's amazing. And what's the best way for people to stay in touch with you?
Sure, so they can check out the website, nakedlight.org, and also...
any social media or anything like that?
Well, they can check out Integral Spiritual Practice Berlin. There's also a group on Facebook, Global Spirituality, that I manage.
Global Spirituality.
Global Spirituality, and there's the Synergy Forum website, so synergyforum.org. Those are the kind of online portals to the work that I'm doing at the moment.
That's amazing, John. Thank you so much for joining us, sharing with us such deep, profound experiences that you've had, and very intimate details as well. So thank you for sharing that. And folks, please stay in touch. As we mentioned, this is a talk show that we are partnered up with Global Purpose Movement. And Global Purpose Movement, the website for that is globalpurposemovement.com. And it's really a collective of change makers convening and co-creating in the globe's current shift towards a world that's working for everyone. We will see you next time. Thank you so much.